Poetry English. Sheikh Hamdan. Finally, the identity of the older woman exposed. Her name rises like a quiet storm in the desert night, a whisper carried across dunes shaped by ancient winds. The world once wondered who the older woman truly was, who walked in silence through the golden halls of destiny, who stepped beside the prince whose heart was too deep for the world. Now her identity moves out from the shadows, not with noise or fear, but with the calm grace of a moonlit memory. And so the story begins a journey woven from time, devotion, and secret light. She was the one who taught him to read the unspoken stories in every horizon, the one who held history not in books, but in the way she breathed. Her steps soft, steady, patient, like the quiet rhythm of sand after sunset. She carried years, not as weight, but as wisdom. She carried pain not as burden, but as a path she could guide another through. To him, she was not older by numbers. She was older in soul, in softness, in the way she guarded her heart. Like a treasure buried below the desert floor waiting for the right seeker. When she met him, the skies above Dubai turned a shade brighter, not because she tried to be seen, but because she had lived long enough to no longer hide from light. Her silence healed him. Her strength steadied him. Her truth shaped him. And he would always remember how she never asked for anything. Not a crown, not a promise, not a future. Only honesty. Only the sincerity of a heart he had spent years locking away. For many nights he walked alone along the long corridors of royalty, the weight of expectation heavy on his shoulders, a crown waiting, a throne watching, and a world demanding perfection. Yet she was the only one who looked at him and saw not a prince, not a future ruler, but a man trying to understand the small tremors of his own soul. She spoke to him not with loud words, but with the quiet certainty of someone who had lived, and he listened, more deeply than anyone knew. They said she was too old. They said she was too unknown. They said she did not belong in a life shaped by golden lineage, but age could not undo the truth she carried. Years could not dim the warmth she offered. Time could not silence the way her presence changed the rhythm of his breath. Because a heart does not measure moments, it measures meaning. And she gave meaning to the corners of his spirit he had never dared to explore. He found her one evening standing at the edge of the sea, waves touching her feet like children returning to their mother, her hair kissed by the wind, her thoughts drifting like birds across the pale blue morning. She looked not like a stranger, not like an outsider, but like someone who had always been meant to stand there, a piece of his story waiting to be claimed. Her identity was not simply her name. It was the life she lived before him, a life carved from resilient softness and the quiet bravery of surviving storms alone, and now exposed to the world. Her truth stood tall. Not fragile, not hidden, but luminous. He did not. The truth once released moved like dawn across a quiet sky. Soft at first, then bold enough to wake everything sleeping beneath it. The world began to whisper again. Who was she really? What story shaped her before she ever stepped into the life of a prince? But the answers were not found in noise. They were tucked in the places where time rests, in the wrinkles by her eyes that came from years of smiling through storms, in the gentleness of her voice, in the steady grace of someone who had carried love carefully across decades. Sheikh Hamdan remembered the first moment he realized she was different. She did not bow to him as others did. She simply looked at him, not with awe, not with fear, not with expectation, but with a calm that felt like home, as if she had already walked through enough life to know that titles fade, but hearts remain. that crowns shine but cannot replace the warmth of sincerity. She listened to him in a way no one else could. People often heard him, but she understood him. She noticed the tremble in his breath after long days. She recognized the loneliness hidden behind duties. She knew the heaviness of a heart, trying to satisfy worlds that would never stop demanding, because she too had lived inside expectations. She too had been told what to be, how to walk, where to stand, and she had outgrown all of it. Years had shaped her into a woman who did not chase approval, a woman who could love without losing herself, and he found comfort in that strength. He found a map to his own soul in the quiet of her presence. The world questioned her age, but he saw her ageless spirit. They questioned her place, but he saw how her steps fit perfectly beside his. They asked why he chose her, but he asked how he ever lived without the wisdom she carried like sunlight held in gentle hands. Many nights they met in silence, not to hide, but to breathe in the truth of each other, under a sky wide enough to protect any secret. Their conversations were long, often wordless, filled with the kind of understanding only two souls with old wounds could share. She spoke of her past not with sadness, but with acceptance. Every hardship a stone polished smooth by time. Every joy a memory tucked safely like warm threads of gold. He learned from her how to be present, how to let the world fall away, how to stand still long enough to hear his own heart beat again. And she learned from him that even a prince could feel lost, that even someone surrounded by luxury could crave the simplicity of a quiet voice saying, "I see you." When the truth of her identity reached the palace walls, ripples spread, whispers gathered. Questions grew like wind before a desert storm. But she did not break. She did not tremble. She had lived enough life to know that storms cannot swallow someone who has already survived their own darkness. He stood beside her not as royalty, but as a man unwilling to let go of the one soul who understood him. He walked through rooms filled with doubtful eyes, yet every step only strengthened his resolve. The revelation spread across the kingdom like a rising tide, slow, certain, unstoppable. Her name now spoken openly, her face no longer hidden. Yet she carried herself with the same quiet dignity she always had, unafraid of the new light touching her life, unafraid of the world that had once insisted she remain invisible. Sheikh Hamdan watched her walk through the palace courtyard, the morning sun resting gently on her shoulders. Every step she took seemed to calm the whispers around her, as if the earth itself understood who she was. Not a scandal, not a secret, but a woman shaped by time, courage, tenderness, and silent storms. He knew the world expected her to shrink, to lower her gaze, to apologize for being older, to apologize for being the one he chose. But she did none of that. She stood with soft strength, the kind that does not roar, the kind that heals without demanding attention, the kind that comes only from living deeply. In her presence, the palace felt less like a golden cage and more like a place where hearts could finally breathe. He saw her pause by the gardens where white flowers opened slowly toward the sun. She touched a single petal, her fingers trembling ever so slightly. Not from fear, but from the overwhelming sweetness of finally being allowed to exist in truth. He approached her quietly, not as a prince, not as a future ruler, but as a man who had loved her long before the world ever knew her name. She turned toward him, her eyes carrying decades of unspoken stories. the kind of stories that are felt rather than heard. And he realized once more why he fought so fiercely for her. Because she was not simply part of his life. She was the echo of his deepest longing, the answer his heart had whispered for years. Together they walked along the long marble corridor. Every footstep a small rebellion. Every glance exchanged a promise made without words. The palace walls had watched many tales, but none like theirs. A love not bound by time. A love not defined by age. A love that stepped into the world with quiet courage. Outside, the world still questioned, still doubted, still tried to make sense of a bond that was never meant for them to understand. Yet they remained untouched by those voices, for their truth lived in a deeper place, a place no rumor could reach, a place guarded by the steady rhythm of two hearts choosing each other again and again. She carried wisdom. He carried hope. Together they created a balance the world had not expected. She taught him stillness. He taught her possibility. She offered him calm. He offered her a place where she no longer needed to hide. As the day faded into dusk, they stood on the balcony overlooking the city, lights flickering below them like small stars rising from the earth. The wind brushed against her hair. He reached out instinctively, letting his hand rest near hers. A gesture so gentle, yet filled with a devotion deeper than any spoken confession. She looked at him, not with surprise, not with hesitation, but with the steady warmth of a woman who finally